Hi, Brittany.
I was asking her a question about Finding Nemo before, right as this was about to get started. And it has to do with the episode, I promise. And also, I can't watch that movie. It makes me cry. But it's such a good movie. I think it's really old now. That's aside from the point. So today, I want to talk about why you should ask why.
Why should you ask why?
And how. But that didn't sound as fun as why ask why, but it's really why ask how and why. So I was a teacher, as you guys know, and I taught at a school where we focused on the Socratic method, and that's named after Socrates, who was a famous, I always get, it's Greek. He was, right? Or was he Roman?
He's Greek, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought, but then I always in my head, I'm like, wait, Greek, Roman, Greek.
Oh no, now I'm doing it. Like, was he Roman?
I know now it's in my head and I'm like getting this out and I looked at this before, but he is one of the, all-time philosophers. So one thing he did, one of the ways he taught is he would never give answers. His students would ask him questions and he would answer with a question. So he would ask why or how, or as I used to ask my students also, how do you know? Why do you think that to be true? You notice I said, why do you think that to be true? I would never, when using the Socratic method, say, why do you feel that way? Because the Socratic method is based on logic. And while we talked about this before when we talked about appeal to emotions with the logical fallacy, emotions have a place. I am not telling you to become a robot and never think about emotions. As somebody who works in marketing and in writing, you have to kind of pull at heartstrings sometimes to make your pitch, make your sell. But when we're talking about logic and thinking things through logically, then you have to put other things like reason first. So that is why I would never ask my student, why do you feel this way? You know, you would say, why do you think this way? So I want to give an example. And it's funny because I'm trying to think of all the examples I could bring up. But if I were to tell you, okay, so right now there's a lot of talk about IRS agents being slashed. That sounded like they were being slashed like a horror movie. Let me rephrase that. But they're cutting a lot of the jobs at the IRS right now, which there are so many jobs at the IRS. It scares me that we needed that many people at the IRS. But now I'm seeing people online, especially where I live in Washington, D.C., because there's a lot of federal workers saying, how dare you do this? How dare you, cut? This is going to be bad for the economy. And so, Rachel, I want you to pretend to be one of those people for a minute and make me an argument that somebody would make in favor of, not cutting these jobs.
So I'm an IRS agent?
Or you're somebody who supports them. Yeah, somebody who's on the side of we need to keep all these jobs.
My cousin is the best IRS agent, and she brings in so much money for the United States government through her audits, and that money is used to feed poor children in Africa through USAID. So we should not cut her job.
So how do you know that? How do you know that's what the money is being used for?
She told me. She told me that, and I believe her.
And why do you believe her?
Because I don't think she's ever lied to me before. Oh, well, that was that one time when she told me she sent me a Christmas card, but she never did.
And I could actually keep going. So I could say, like, how do you know that? How do you know that? And I'll be honest, when you're talking to someone doing the Socratic method, you get very annoyed and very frustrated. And the reason I brought up Finding Nemo is because I think it's that movie where there's the seagulls that are going, why? And if you've ever had like a 3-year-old sibling, or you've babysat, or you've been around any 3-year-old, I swear it's always like 3 to 5 years old too. They have the Socratic method down and they don't even know it. You'll be sitting there like, why is the sky blue? And you'd be like, it's blue. Well, but why? Why is your hair brown? Why are you that tall? Why is the sun the sun? And you're just sitting there like, I don't know. I don't know. And sometimes you're just like, stop saying why. But it's always funny to me. And I try to be really patient when that happens. And I know parents, sometimes you're just like, oh my goodness, please don't say why one more time. But it's fun because I'm like, they're so inquisitive. They're actually doing a better job at getting to the bottom and finding truth than I think a lot of adults are, because we want to have our own thoughts validated. So when I was a teacher, we taught the kids how to question authority, but respectfully. There are ways to do it. So I would sometimes, I think I've shared this before, I would sometimes put the wrong date on the board on purpose. and wait to see what would happen.
Ooh, what would happen?
Well, so that's what's funny. And this is, I loved all my students, but it's funny because sometimes you'd get a student. So somebody would say, raise their hand, miss, you wrote the wrong date. And I'd say, no, I didn't. And they'd say, no, but you did. And I'd say, well, how do you know? Well, why do you think, or not, why do you think I wrote the wrong date? But then there'd be another kid and he would be like, she's the teacher. Oh, go on.
I have a question first, though. Like, how wrong would the date be? Would it be like 1946?
I'll be honest, I don't remember. I think it was like same year, maybe wrong month, or something where it was obviously a mistake, but not like so outlandish where it was like 2055, something like same year. And then I would have another student because I would ask, I was asking the student who was challenging me, how do you know? Why do you know that? And then I remember I had one student and he was feisty, but he was like, well, she's the teacher, so it's correct then. And then I pressed him, well, why do you know? How do you know? And it was fun because, again, you get frazzled. You get frazzled when you're being thrown those questions, but it's meant to be that way because you actually have to sit and think about it. If you watch a presidential debate, you see people ask questions and then talking points come up. One thing, I've done a lot of media training. I'm sure you have too, Rachel. One thing they always tell you is answer the question you wish you were asked, not the question you were asked. That's media 101. That's how people go on the news. That's what you do. But that's the opposite of this, right? Because you can just go on any tangent. So to really get someone to think logically, you have to ask how and why, and it takes a little bit. It's not going to be instantaneous, but they're going to keep challenging this. And that is how I actually formed the beliefs I have today. It was somebody I dated in college, and I came home from history class one day and I said, FDR was the greatest president that ever lived. The New Deal was amazing. And that we'll do a whole other episode on that. And he saved the world and all this stuff. And I remember he's a dear friend of mine still, he said, what are you talking about? Like, how do you know that? Well, my history professor said that blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, why did that work? Why do you think that happened? Or, why do you believe that? Okay, well, how do you know that? And by the end of that conversation, I wanted to throw a pillow at this boy. And but I was frustrated. It was because he got me thinking in a way where I had to deal with this. My whole belief structure was being shooken up. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't really know how this is true or why. I don't really know why I believe this. And I had to really sit with my thoughts. And I went to a bookstore. I remember this is back when physical books were a thing. Bookstore. Do Barnes and Noble still exist? I think we have one in my city. And I sat there and I was trying to read books and I was like, I'm going to prove him wrong. He doesn't know. FDR was great. And it was through that thought pattern and that thought process where I had to realize that FDR was not this savior of the economy that I thought he was because I had heard it in college. And that was actually, I think, a really big turning point for me in college in general, because that's when I learned that just because somebody said something, somebody that was a professor said something doesn't mean it was true. Just because I said something and I was a teacher didn't mean it was true. So I had to really unpack that. So that was a big moment in my life. And I didn't know then that was the Socratic method. I didn't connect the dots until I became a teacher much later on. But that was how I really restructured and had to really form my beliefs, because we hear something on the news and we think, well, that must be true. And maybe we have an emotional connection to it, You don't want the IRS people to get fired. They have to, do this and aid to Africa and all that stuff. And then it's like, okay, but why do we think that's true? How do we know that? So it's difficult. It's actually really challenging. One thing after this episode, I would actually, maybe as you're sitting around the dinner table, or maybe not because you might get frustrated with each other, but have for a family homework assignment, maybe take turns playing the role of Socrates. And another aspect of the Socratic method, especially when teaching, is you don't stand up at the front of the room and just sit in a desk and teach. You need to be walking around and interactive, because you're making it a very, I know I already said interactive, but interactive conversation where it's like very animated. You're talking about it. You're engaging. That's the word I was looking for, engaging the students. But yeah, families, I would actually really be curious to know how that goes. Pick some topics and just take turns. Rachel, have you ever done that intentionally with your boys?
Well, they've definitely done the Socratic method on me, lots. And as a mom, I always wanted to be responsive to that. And so, like when they were like 3 and 4 and really into that, I would just kind of settle in and just, well, the sky is blue because of crystals and refraction of light, and I would just go with it as long as I possibly could. And I found that eventually all conversations like that end with "because I said so" or "because it is."
Right, and it's funny because that's so.
But
funny.
I think it's so healthy to deal with that way of thinking and arguing your point, and it trains your brain because you eventually start asking yourself why.
Mm-hmm.
And you do it on yourself as you're watching the news, as you're reading something, as you're learning something. You eventually start just naturally asking why, and then you know what you need to know more about. What do you need to investigate further, and how do you know these things? And getting down to original sources rather than what other people are saying about a subject. Find the truth like from the most original source that you can, so that it's not filtered through somebody else's interpretation of it. So all of that is good training for your brain to help you find the truth.
I mean, if you can master that, and not only that, if you can learn to tolerate it being asked of you, not even just asking yourself. But this is something I've been actually challenging myself to do lately, and I'm not perfect at it because we all get stuck in the boxes of our beliefs. We believe a certain thing about something, so we need everything to be true that helps build our case. Or we need to think everything is principled that supports our cause. And I've had to stop a few times and be like, okay, I like the end result of this, but was this way or was this method or was this step something that aligns with the principles that I believe are good based on logic, based on reason? And sometimes I've had to kind of sit back and be like, okay, maybe that one isn't, and so it's been really challenging for me, but I think the biggest thing you can do, and like I said, I am not perfect. I'm not here to be like, you should all be like me and be so humble, because I have to work on it just like everybody else. But to take that moment and kind of ask yourself, play that, it's not even devil's advocate, but play that conversation between Socrates and his student, play it within your own head and just see where you end up. So again, your homework assignment, families, I want to hear about it too, is I want you guys to try doing this and switch, take turns who's doing the questioning. Switch roles, pick a topic, maybe a topic we've talked about on the show before. And let us know how it goes. Let us know who cracked first, who was like, we have to stop this because I said so. That'll be funny.
How long until you get to because it is? Just because.
Exactly. Well, we will wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, we will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.